Hello, welcome to our new channel. I am the Sharp-Dressed Man.
And I'm the drugged fish stick. What?
Nothing. Anyways, we're here to share our stories with the internet. All kinds of stories, all possible genres.
But not all possible length.
There's a size limit?
No one wants to listen to us spout off the entire works of Tolkien.
I do!
Go away, Bob.
Oh!
Bob is the guy we have living in our ceiling. Speaking of which, we will not be reading other people's works. All the pieces read are written primarily by us.
And the voices in our heads.
Well, yes, that goes without saying.
It's pretty cool, though. In the process of planning this channel, you've already gotten a story published. Not just a story, but a novel, in fact.
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Why don't you tell us what it's about?
Well, it takes place in medieval times.
You mean the restaurant?
No! The actual time period! Medieval Europe at the end of the 10th century. It's called The Last Stand of the Dragon, and it follows the story of a female dragon trying to survive in a world that wants to kill her.
Now, from what I understand, in stories like these, dragons are cast as the evil monsters. But in this one, the knight is the antagonist, right?
Well, that just means you don't read very much. But it's a little more complicated than that. I can't tell you much more, but I will be reading the prologue to you, just so you can get a feel for it. What?
Never mind, just get on with it.
Okay. So, without further ado, this is the prologue for The Last Stand of the Dragon. The Last Stand of the Dragon. Prologue. A mountain stood firm on the earth. It towered over 1,000 feet into the air. Trees grew up and down the mighty granite slopes. Pine trees covered in a fine powder of snow, and hidden amongst these trees was a cave. A cavern that opened like the mouth of an enormous beast, and stretched back hundreds of feet into the heart of the mountain. Inside this cave, in its deep darkness hidden from the rest of the world, was a creature, a reptile of great size and strength, powers of legend, an animal of such power the world had not seen for millions of years. Now, the beast slept. Her legs were pulled up tight against her body, with her tail wrapped up to her nose. Her chest rose with each breath. A sound echoed through the cave, the sound of a large rock being pushed and rolled down the side of the mountain, crashing and dislodging more rocks as it went. The creature's eyes slowly fluttered before snapping open completely. The yellow-green orbs jerked around furiously in their sockets, swiftly adjusting to the darkness that surrounded her. Her slumber had been disturbed. A new sound, the crunching of rock beneath feet and the clinking of metal against metal, replaced the first. Voices as well. At least 3 voices. She could hear them as they echoed off the walls of her cave. "This is the cave, you say?" "Shh! We don't want to wake it!" Humans. They had come for her. She pushed herself up from the ground, disturbing the skeletal remains of her prey. This was why they had come, laying all around her scattered in all directions. Bones. Bones of cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs littered the floor. All of them animals she had stolen from the nearby village. That must have been why the humans were here. They had grown tired of her stealing their livestock, but what choice did she have? She had to feed herself, and food in these mountains had all but disappeared. Standing on 4 legs, she opened and flexed her wings to work out the stiffness in her muscles. She tilted her head from one side to the other. The bones in her neck popped. Slowly, she stretched out her legs. The sounds grew closer and closer. She crouched low to the ground and started to slink across the floor of her cave, like a large cat. Ahead of her was a crevice in the wall of her cave, a crack in the rock that reached from the floor to the ceiling, and just wide enough to squeeze her massive shoulders in. With her wings pulled tight against her body, she backed into the small crevice. She curled her tail up under her body and hugged the ground. The muscles in her back legs tensed up while she waited. "Rennick," one of the voices said, "bring me the torch, and hand me my crossbow." "Yes, sir," a second voice responded. A flickering light danced along the walls of her cave. Through the gap in the cave wall she saw them. The first was a tall man, about 6 feet, with black hair that reached to his shoulders, and a short beard which grew down from his cheeks to his chin. His upper body was covered with armor that glistened in the light of the torch he held in his right hand. A cape made of dark blue fabric hung from his shoulders all the way down to his feet. His legs had armor on the thighs and shins on top of dark brown pants. At his waist he carried a sword, still held in its scabbard. In his left hand he held a weapon, but unlike any weapon she had ever seen before. He gripped the stock like a sword, but it had a bow and arrow in place of the blade. Coming up behind the first human was another, smaller and younger, also dressed in armor. He dragged behind him a small sled, loaded down with various types of weapons, from axes to daggers to swords. His hair was short and wavy red, with a face dotted with freckles. "Master Vince," the boy whispered, "is it here?" "That's what he says." The taller of the two, Vince, motioned behind him. The first two humans walked past the crevice without noticing a thing. The shadows hid her from their sight. A third human came up after them. His hands clutched the sword at his waist by the hilt. "I swear, this is the cave. This is where that beast lives." "Well," the first human kicked a rib bone and it skidded across the ground. "With all these bones here, it's obvious that something big and carnivorous lives in this cave." The creature's leg muscles tensed up in preparation. Her claws scratched at the ground as she waited. Just a few more steps. Just a little closer. A little more. Closer. Closer. The third human stopped and looked. Why? What was he waiting for? Just one more step. Just one more. The third human stepped forward after the others. In that instant the reptile thrust herself out of the crevasse. Her front claws stretched out, mouth agape. Her entire body weight smashed into the man, forcing him against the wall of the cave. Her claws dug into his chest and her teeth tore at his throat. The man did not even have time to scream. She took the body in her mouth and shook it, tasting human blood as it flowed down her throat. "Master! The dragon!" The younger of the two, Rennick, shouted. "I see!" The elder grabbed the bowstring of his weapon and pulled it back, locking it in place. She turned her head and saw the other two. Vince held up his weapon and pulled a small trigger on the bottom. The bowstring snapped forward with a twang, and a small arrow shot from the weapon and caught in her ribs. She growled in pain as the sharp metal tip embedded itself into her body. A rumbling growl came from within her throat. Already she could feel the heat rising in her chest as she prepared to use her most deadly weapon. She inhaled deeply and pulled her head back. She unleashed her fire breath. Orange, yellow, and red flames flew from her mouth and engulfed her attackers. Fire surrounded them. They each wrapped themselves up in their cloaks and fell to the ground. The dragon turned towards the exit of her cave, running as fast as her legs could carry her. She ran into the open air and flared her wings. With a powerful downstroke, she pushed against the ground and shot into the air. This place was no longer suited for her to live. The time had come for her to find a new home.